Hello, everyone. Okay, this week is Keep Your Love On by Danny Silk, chapter 6, and the chapter is called The Trust Cycle. It starts off saying, in the book of Matthew, Jesus said it is better for someone to tie an enormous rock around your neck, kick you into the deepest part of the ocean, and let you sink, rather than allow you to cause a child to stumble. So what he is basically saying is protecting the trust of the vulnerable is a big deal. And there's a really good reason for it. Because when people mess with your trust at an early age, you are likely to struggle in life. Okay, so I want you to allow that to sink in and really think back to yourself. As a kid, were you trusting in an adult and they hurt your trust? And then as you became an adult yourself, was it difficult for you to trust others? Was it difficult for you to become close with others? Perhaps it was a family member, maybe not a parent, but maybe a cousin or a sibling, and something that they did or said to you just made you build a wall and you shut down, and you didn't want to have close relationships with others because you had a fear that if you did, things would go bad. And so you just remained your quiet self or your bold, outgoing, loud self, but on the inside you were really hurting and really struggling. So we're going to dive into this trust cycle chapter. When you think about it, probably most gang members or high school dropouts or addicts had bad childhoods. Now, that's not saying everybody, but that's saying the majority. Most abusers were probably abused themselves. Most divorcees probably had divorced parents. So affairs, selfishness, self-inflicted pain, and walls of protection all stem from broken trust during childhood. So I want you to picture this. A baby comes into the world, and what do babies do? They cry, okay? Their first instinct that's coming to them is, can I trust the world? So this can be answered by the primary caregiver. Are they meeting their physical and emotional needs? Well, but why do babies cry? Well, pretty much they cry for everything. They're crying because they're hungry. They're crying because they're tired. Their stomach hurts. They need changed. A numerous amount of options on why babies cry. So as a caregiver, are you meeting their need? And if you do meet their need, then the trust cycle is completed. Well, what is a trust cycle? It's at the top you have a need, and then you start to express your need, and that's where the babies are crying. Maybe they're hungry, and so they start crying because they're hungry, okay? So now down here, we're going to continue on the trust cycle, and the adult is responding. The adult is making a bottle for this baby. So now the baby drinks this bottle, the need is satisfied, and now the baby is happy and is comfortable. That is a trust cycle. Now there is an opposite, the mistrust cycle, and that's basically the same thing where you have a need. So you need to feel loved by your spouse in the form of touch. And so you express, I want to hold your hand, I want a hug, and the other person says, that's really uncomfortable for me, or they just ignore it all together. And then this person still needs to feel loved in the form of touch, and they're not getting it. So now up here, they become angry. There's no comfort. And that's the mistrust cycle that goes in the circle because their needs are not being met. So how do we complete a trust cycle? Well, it's through relational connection. I'm going to read this, what he puts in here, because it brought up a very interesting story that I remembered reading. It says, the trust cycle can only be completed through a relational connection because only a relationship can meet the full range of a baby's needs. If babies are fed, clothed, and washed, but never experience prolonged human touch, cuddling, or face-to-face contact with their primary caregiver, their brains, personalities, and capacity for bonding will remain underdeveloped and in some cases permanently stunted. Now, when I read that part, I remember reading a story about the wolf boy from India and how he was raised by wolves, and some hunters found him and brought him to an orphanage. And while he was at that orphanage, he could not physically or mentally or emotionally bond with the teachers or the other students. He, in essence, thought that he was not a human, but rather a wolf, because that's how he was raised. He didn't have any human interactions. And so I was reading through the story and through the doctor notes, and it said that there's lots of kids in India throughout time that have been brought to orphanages that were raised by animals. And those kids interacted with each other and started forming bonds together to show each other how to survive in the world, essentially. And so I thought that was really interesting that they say that. Maybe in your childhood, you grew up with no connection to your mom or dad. Maybe they were there, but emotionally, they were not there for you. And so you grew up almost acting in like a robotic form. You were there doing your job. You went home and did whatever you did. You went to bed, you got up, you did again. There was like no emotional connection whatsoever. So we go in here to say our deepest need is to love and to be loved by other human beings. I mean, think about it. When you make a new friend or with your spouse or with your family member, your greatest need is, I want you to love me, and vice versa. You know, I want to feel that love and connection. And what happens if they don't reciprocate it back to you, or in the past they had done something to hurt you, and so now there is a wall there, there's a barrier there. So by completing the trust cycle, that helps to form our relationships and to fulfill the needs that we have. But here's the thing, the trust cycle, even though it can be like a greased wheel and it can be going in a perfect circle and everything be great, it can break down at any point. At any point, it can stop. And that's because the trust is damaged. It can be damaged if, let's say, I fail to express my needs to Tyler. We've been on a trust wheel, everything's great. And I fail to express to Tyler a need that I have, and he ignores it or pushes it off or tries to fulfill it in a different way. And all of a sudden my wheel is hinged down here. It's not continuing because my trust was broken with whatever I relayed to him. So if I fail to identify and express my needs, or if he doesn't respond, or he responds in a negative way, the need is not met. And so that's where your trust cycle can be broken, and it can start to form mistrust if you don't heal it right away. So here's the thing. We all experience broken trust in life. Every single one of us is going to experience broken trust, whether it's a coworker, a family member, a sibling, a friend. We will all experience it at some point, if not multiple times in our life. Most experience it in childhood. Your parents, you know, they're human beings. They make mistakes. I make mistakes for my kids. My parents have made mistakes. I mean, we all make mistakes. The thing is, we perform our trust cycle and we fix it. We don't let it sit and fester, because then it forms mistrust, and mistrust goes into deeper, darker areas that we don't want to dive into. Here are some things that people tend to agree with whenever they have painful experiences. They start to believe things like, no one loves me. There's something wrong with me. I don't deserve to have my needs met. So if you have said any of those to yourself, which I know I have as a child, they will start to create an expectation for unmet needs. So I'm going to say that again. Agreeing with those lies that I just read will create an expectation for unmet needs. The expectation leads you into more painful, disappointing experiences, and that prevents the wound from ever healing. Now, if you've gone through counseling or inner healing, you know how just one bad experience, just one, can bring an empowered lie into your life and cause pain and hardships, okay? So for people who grew up in environments where they were consistently experiencing neglect or punishment in response to their needs, their damage is significant. The cycle of mistrust creates alienated, painful realities where people feel hopeless about ever having their needs met because they were unable to trust others and they were unable to form strong relational connections. These people cut off from love become survivors. Okay, so what is a survivor? Survivors manipulate their environments because now we can't trust people, so now we're going to have to control things, circumstances, or people in order to get some of our needs met. So a survivor manipulates their environment and other people to get some of their needs met. They don't expect to be loved because after years of abandonment, neglect, and abuse, they believe they are unworthy of love. They don't expect relationships to last, and why should they? I mean, it's never been safe for them to trust or be vulnerable. Survivors end up creating a reality where they're not loved, relationships don't last, and the pain of unmet needs continues to destroy their lives. So I really dug into this. What exactly is a need? Because we're saying needs. So what is a need? Well, it could be you want to feel wanted and accepted rather than being used. You could need to have the feeling of being understood and instead of just heard. The feeling of being loved instead of the superficial love that you're not actually feeling in your heart. It's more someone saying, here, take this, now please leave me alone. So needs are everywhere, and those are just very few. What happens when you start to create that reality? You have an orphan spirit. Now, in the beginning of this chapter, we read that verse about the book of Matthew and how Jesus said, you might as well tie a stone around your neck and throw you into the deep end of the ocean for leading a child to experience this pain. He says that it's so serious to cause a child to stumble, and it's revealing the jealous, protective love of the Father for his lost orphan children, which includes all of us. He wants them to come to him because he will fulfill us. He will take our orphan spirit and he will fulfill us. So he is declaring that we are all to be born again. What does that mean? I know I have people out there that are saying, I don't understand what you're meaning to be born again because I was born in the hospital already. What are you referring to? Okay, what he's saying is we're going to start this trust thing over again. We're starting fresh. So you are being placed in the Father's arms and you're going to experience unconditional love. You're going to experience care, acceptance. When you have needs and you cry out to him, he is going to fill you. He is going to love you. You're going to learn to trust again, and you're going to be able to build relationships with not only him, but others, and your heart will be satisfied. He also goes on to say, there is no one too broken or too far gone with an orphan spirit that he or she cannot come home to the Father to live and to love as God designed. Now with that, I want to give you a little bit of a story about when I met Tyler. We were both in college, and we were on the rodeo team, and we spent a lot of time together. And Tyler almost had this orphan spirit about him because he would always say, I was told I have a hard heart. I can't love, and you can't love me because I have a hard heart. And that's what he heard growing up, is I have a hard heart. And I used to say, no, you don't. It's just a little cracked, but it's not a hard heart. And he believed it. He believed the lie that he wasn't ever going to be good enough to be loved and that he wouldn't be good enough to give love off. And it went into our marriage. It went into our family when we had kids. And there were times that we struggled really bad because he still had this mindset of this orphan spirit of, I can't be loved. I can't trust you. You know, I'm here for myself. And so when Tyler went to Men's Encounter October 2020, he started to break down those walls, and he started to realize the lies that he had believed for years. And essentially, he was born again. And I'm going to admit, when he came home, I was skeptical because I was like, I see you acting differently. I hear you acting differently. I'm feeling your love for the first time. But will it last? Is this just a superficial, it's 24 hours and then I'm going to go back to the old ways? And I can honestly say it's been here ever since then. He has not let it go. Now, sure, we may stumble a time or two, but he always runs back to the Father. And because of that, his needs are being met. He's expressing himself, which everybody knows. Men are really hard to express themselves. I mean, women are too, but guys have always been on this level where they're like, I'm good. And inside, there's something bothering them, but they don't know how to express it to us. But ever since Tyler went there, he now expresses himself, and it is an amazing thing to witness and to be around. And so this thing in here that I read a minute ago, where there is no one too broken or too far gone with an orphan spirit, that is so true. I witnessed it firsthand with Tyler, and he will be the first one to tell you the same. It doesn't matter where you're at. He will welcome you with open arms, and you are always welcome to come back. God will fill you with so much love, and so it's just been amazing. Okay, so that was my little mini story. So now let's go to expressing our needs. So in the last chapter, we talked about communication and how it is like the core of building healthy relationships. Well, expressing our needs and building relational connections are completely dependent upon each other. So that level of communication, not the superficial hi-bye, but the really deep intimacy that you get from communication, that's what we need in order to build a strong relational connection. And that's where the trust cycle begins. So if you cannot communicate your needs to another person clearly, it's going to be very difficult for that person to meet them.